Hey, what's up, everybody? This is an open discussion with C3 Films. My name is Chris, and this is.
Cheryl.
And today we're talking about the Netflix movie, The God Committee. So we are going to be going into spoiler territory here. So if you have not seen the movie, go check it out on Netflix. It just came out, and then come back and see what we have to say about it. But without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into this. Um, I had no idea what to expect when you had said The God Committee. I guess I had an idea of what it could be about, but I guess the specific subject matter of because I figured with the title like the God Committee is going to be people playing God, quote unquote, but I didn't realize it was going to be based around the people that choose who gets bumped up in the list to get a heart.
Yeah,
So
I didn't.
yeah,
I didn't really know what to expect either because I kind of was just trying to find stuff for us to review, and I honestly just thought that it's possible that this was gonna do well on Netflix, but I'm not sure if it really is. But that being said, it's not a bad movie. I actually quite enjoyed it. It's not something I would watch more than once because it is heavy, but it
yeah,
does really challenge you in terms of thinking about how to make choices. I guess maybe not that in a sense, but it challenges or shines a light on how things work
mm,
in a system that is supposed to be fair, supposed to be. So it's quite political. It's also got a lot to do with money, and it was also very suspenseful. It was more suspenseful than I.
what you'd expect.
Yeah, I didn't expect any suspense at all. But when I say suspense, it's not like a scary suspense. It's kind of
Mm-hmm.
like when you want to find out like who is gonna get the final rose on The Bachelor, and it goes to commercial.
Right. It's like building up how are they going to vote, like because the entire movie it takes place, multiple timelines or multiple time frames, excuse me. So there's the past and there's the present, and we spend about equal time in each, but the past is where the biggest mystery or the most suspense for me at least was located, because it was based on how are they going to vote, who's going to get this heart. And it was very effective because this movie is not an expensive movie. Like the most expensive thing about this was maybe paying Kelsey Grammer and and then having these different locations. But a lot of the past scenes takes place in one room. And even though it's only in one room with like what, five characters in that room, it is one of the most intriguing parts of the movie. Like the other parts of the movie are fine, but I found myself to be the most engaged when we're in that boardroom and we're hearing the arguments from each of the individuals there. And each of the individuals there are characterized very well in a limited amount of time.
Yeah, and at first I didn't really quite understand why we had two different timelines. And my
Mm-hmm.
first suspicion was that we were gonna see like a character growth, like the difference between Julia Stiles' character and the other doctor in the past and then in the future. And to a degree, they do that, but I think what the actual point of it was to like just spoil the end of the movie. Uh, that basically the rich guy, what's his name, Granger,
Mm-hmm.
is trying to throw money at the problem to save his son, and then he tries to throw money at the situation to save Boxer. And
Yeah.
in the end, even though he shelled out so much cash, they both still died.
Yep.
And he didn't get what he wanted. So in the end, I guess the message there is that money can't buy everything.
Money can't buy life. Um, and I thought that the reason I thought that what was going to happen in the past was that, like the way I saw it for having a legitimate reason for having two time frames was that in the past I figured he would have voted the to save Taylor with the idea that that will allow them to save more lives because it allows him to do his research. It allows the hospital to get better funding. So it's like that whole thing of how many lives did you save by letting two people die? And it's very interesting actually. And then I thought the end was going to be him being having to be convinced to make that choice yet again because I could see how that choice would haunt him. But if you think about it, if you live as someone who is spearheading this research, how many lives will be saved by you accepting this heart, regardless of how they came into having the contact of this heart? And so that was what I thought was going to be his kind of dilemma, and it kind of is. And he does make the decision to get the heart, but like you already mentioned, it just he dies anyway. So the hopeful message at the end is just that Julia Stiles' character ends up taking over his research and seems that she ends up being successful. So there is a kind of light at the end of the tunnel. But this entire movie basically just, I mean, it asks some hard questions of what do you do if you were in the room? What do you do? Do you go for the money knowing that you could save more lives than you could without it? Or do you try to stick to your morals, which two characters do, and try to give the heart to someone that you think honestly deserves a chance?
Yeah, and I think that, it at first it seemed straightforward that of course that they would give the heart to Walter, but then
Yeah.
they made it complicated by having, this rich kid Trip have an
Mm.
accident, and then
Yeah.
yeah, I think you said Taylor, which is Julia
Yeah.
Stiles' character, but like, and then they painted him as a bad person, and then they're like, but wait, actually, maybe he's a good person who's like a father to be, and and he's actually clean, and then we
Hmm.
find out like, well, no, actually, he's not. But then it got even more complicated because of the money and everything, and the pressure, and the fact that they're already having a hard, they're being watched
Hmm.
by the board. So like there's a lot at stake. Like there's so many stakes. And so like the right thing to do at the end, we basically find out, is that it probably would have been better off going to Walter, but it didn't. But the consequences, like if they did give it to Walter, there it would have been a different movie. We would have had
Yeah.
a movie about other consequences. Like they would have probably ended the program. The hospital might close down because they didn't have funding. So, like,
Yeah.
it's kind of a, what do you do? It's actually quite difficult to choose. And if there were no politics though,
Hmm.
and you remove money from the picture, then yeah, like of course, like the right thing to do probably would have been to go to Walter. But
Right.
like that's one, it's not real life, and
Hmm.
two, it's just
Yeah.
yeah, it's just like who's to say that it would have helped him survive either? Like there's just no way to know. And at the end of the day, two people still have to die.
Yeah. Exactly. No matter what, someone's still dying. And the sad thing is that the the introduction of the money is like you were suggesting is very realistic. Like these situations when lives are on the line, the movie makes it clear that the person with the money is the one that has the most advantage. And they could have still voted to give it to Walter. It actually came down to a really close situation. But where the movie gets complicated is where the individual character motivations come in too. And they're supposed to be unbiased, but they make a point of showing how everyone is a little biased in some kind of way, even when they're coming across as impartial. Kelsey Grammer's character, he seems to be like the most like logical and straightforward about like how his vote should go. But then you find out that part of the reason that he doesn't want the other person in the room is because he doesn't want the person that's funding his research to find out that he voted against his son and then probably lose his research. So now he's motivated in a way that isn't clearly pure. And I think it's interesting that I think his name was Lau. Dr. Lau is the only one that spends the entire movie abstaining because of his own intrinsic bias, when the fact is, everyone in that room ends up having intrinsic bias the moment the money is introduced.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think Dr. Taylor's trying to be impartial as well. But then she
Mm-hmm.
interviews the girlfriend and she finds out about the pregnancy, and but she still leans more towards Walter. So I think because she probably didn't believe that that Trip was a good guy because of her story.
Right. But to her credit, though, and this is where you get a little bit of like the arc and the character growth, is that she started off coming across as very idealistic. And even though at the end of the day she still votes for the person that she wanted to vote for in the beginning of the conversation, the way she talks about Trip is from a place of change because she gets this other information that could sway the vote away from him, but she chooses not to say it because it would not be fair to Trip, who does not have a chance to defend himself, and therefore that should have no bearing on their decision of how they should vote.
I actually think that she chose not to reveal that information because she promised the girlfriend that she wouldn't tell anyone.
Oh, maybe, yeah, that's true too. So, I mean, either way, it was still very cool. And I feel like a lot of the conversations that were happening, I understood where everyone was coming from. Um, Even the head doctor, I forget her name, but the lead person that's over the whole hospital, like I I don't think I can't condone her what she did, but I understand why she did it. You get this moment where you find out that the hospital is all she has left, and so this is an opportunity for her to change everything for the better, and that's why she wants to take it. It just it's sad for her because at the end of the day, she's the one person that gets nothing out of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the hospital gets to thrive, which is great, but she doesn't get to be there to bask in its success.
Yeah. It's a pretty heavy film. I don't quite get the motivations for. Well, I guess she also wanted the money. The one brown doctor.
Oh yeah, I love her. I love her actress. I love how she played that character, and like how matter of fact she was when she would speak about everything that they were talking about. And this does a good job of putting your central characters in conflict with each other because there are a lot of arguments that happen. There's a lot of shouting. There's a lot of disagreeing with people across the table, and I liked how these conversations played out. One of the things that caught me off guard in the beginning that I didn't necessarily like initially was the fact that Julia Stiles' character and Kelsey Grammer were in a relationship with each other. That felt very Hollywood to me because Hollywood always does that. It puts these old men with these younger women, but there was actually a story reason for it. And when I saw like how they were relating it for the story itself, I said, okay, it's not like this does not happen in reality. It absolutely does. So I can get more on board. But I'm glad that it wasn't one of those things where like most movies they'll just ignore it and just be like, yeah, that's don't pay attention to it. We're not gonna call attention to it. But this movie actually it calls attention to it and it knows that this is the case, but there's a reason for it. And then I was able to accept it more.
I mean, I don't entirely feel like it was necessary. I think they could have done something else with it. I personally
Mm-hmm.
thought it was kind of weird that they did that. That was the choice.
Yeah.
especially since like there's a huge age difference. Um, I just didn't really quite understand why it was necessary. And the only connection that I could really put there is so that it would give her a reason to visit him in the future.
So the reason I think that it was necessary is because they wanted to put them on opposing sides of the argument. It read to me more like the young startup versus the grizzled veteran. And you can't have that experience with people who are the same age. So they wanted them to have they wanted them to have the difference in experience of like the new person coming in versus the old person that's been there a long time, which is also why when they flash forward to the future, they show her and she's like not the same, and when she's making the vote, she's voting no, and they make sure that you see that she's changed from how she was like in 2014. And I think that the reason they wanted them to be in a relationship, which I agree they didn't necessarily need, but I can see the reason they did that was to create more of that conflict between the two of them of just not like, oh, we're just agreeing with each other because we're sleeping with each other. But I definitely, it's not needed, but I think they wanted them to have some type of connection so that when you see the differences in how they feel about a thing, it's not just, well, we're two separate people that just feel differently about this thing because, well, I'm old and you're young and we draw the line and that's the end of it. It was an extra little bit of attention because we're also like romantically involved.
But then it wasn't even really romantic at all. It just
Yeah,
seemed
not
like
romantic.
it
Yeah,
was just like a thing they were doing together, which I thought was weird. Like it would have been different if they actually, had feelings together, but it was
that's true.
very like there was no chemistry. It didn't seem like their characters had any feelings at all and like for each other. And so I feel like it would have been better if, or maybe not better, but like easier to swallow,
Hmm.
and not be like as offended seeing it, I guess, is if they were like maybe a mentor, like a
Student.
different rank in seniority, like she just became like an attending or something, and she learned
Hmm.
from him, and he's about to retire. So it's like a difference in like modern practice. Like he's the old traditional way of thinking, and she's the modern way of thinking. I don't understand why they couldn't twist it that way. It's
Right.
really only because of the kid that I think that they had that there to give them that extra connection.
Yeah.
But I didn't think it was necessary. Maybe like the pregnancy to have her relate more to the girlfriend because
Hmm.
she was also pregnant.
Right.
But then she could have been pregnant with anybody.
And the father could still just not be around.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think if they did do that, then to drive home the fact that the father was making an active choice, that we would have had to meet that character, because that was another part of it, that this person's actively choosing not to be in the life, and they're not just some phantom figure. Like we see this person, and the person is someone we can pass and can easily pick up the phone and call, and the audience is connected to this person. So like they probably would have had to at least have the father if they wanted that same type of feeling related behind the fact that actively choosing not to be a part of the kid's life, which would relate to Trip, actively not being a part of this kid's life, which is interesting too because Trip is a character that has no dialogue. The actor that got to play Trip is basically just a body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know, right?
So yeah, it's very interesting. But no, I definitely like hear where you're coming from with that, and that was like the one part of the movie that felt odd to me, which is why I want to bring it up. But outside of that, like, actually, it almost even feels like Kelsey Grammer didn't feel comfortable with it because they don't actually kiss in the movie. And like the one moment they have, he kind of like touches her cheek and caresses it a little bit, but it almost feels like the way a father would a daughter in that moment. So part of me was wondering if Kelsey Grammer or Julia Stiles are like, we're not kissing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, like honestly, I get that, like, I like that they had that, connection at the end, in the future when she basically encourages him to take the heart, and like Granger appeals to her to try to convince him, and like who else would be able to do that than his past lover from 9 years ago. But
Right.
but I think it could have been equally fine if like they were just really good friends and they had that bond in mentorship, and then she did, because she ends up being his successor in the study, in the
Right.
trials. So that would still make sense, and it would still make sense for her to push him and like try to appeal to him and have that like bond with him, where like I like you're like a father figure to me. Like the way they can do that, it could have been like a father figure thing for her. But anyway, I just didn't see the necessity in it. It just made me feel weird, to be
Yeah.
honest. And like you said, I know it happens too. Like it is a thing, but it's I don't like how it's normalized
Hmm.
in television. So,
Every time.
but
Every
one thing
time.
I did like her line when she says, "Keep your money, boxer," when he offers to pay for
He's like,
child support.
I'll support the kid financially, of course.
Right. No, but I think it's also because, like, in her mind, because that was in the 2014, she know. I think she felt that the money that he has is dirty because he had just voted for Trip, and he had
Hmm.
said like, "I vote for the money."
Right.
So, so I feel like she part of her was like, "I don't want your dirty money."
Yeah. I think it's that. I was wondering about that actually a little bit. That was something that I ended the movie like really thinking about, because part of me was wondering if it came from a place of, especially because in the future she's talking about how she wants the kid to at least be able to say that he met his father, and that the connection is more important to her. So like in that moment when he's saying, "I'll support the kid financially," it's basically his way of saying, "I'm not going to be in this kid's life, but you can have this money." But for her, the more important thing would be at least see the kid. I don't want your money. So like that was kind of like how I read it at the end, especially because of after his whole thing of where he talks during the future and he says like my dad didn't give me anything, or except for this like disease or the thing, that bad heart or whatever. And it's like, okay, and then your dad was a jerk, and so you're just gonna be a jerk to your kid. Way to pass
Right.
it, way to pay it forward, buddy.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah.
Different interpretations. I'm not sure what they were going for, but it's quite complex. I think that a lot of the thoughts in this movie are complex. It's a lot to think about. I think it's not as straightforward as you would think it is, because it's definitely politics. It's definitely money. It's definitely all of that. But there's so many other complex themes that they're exploring in this movie.
Yeah.
Um, so I'd only watch it one time.
Yep. I only watched it one time. Uh, I wondered. I didn't really think about it while I was watching the movie, but like when I watch some of these movies and they have hard decisions to make, sometimes like the question movie asks you is, "What would you do?" And I don't know. I don't know that I ever felt like I was in a situation where like I was thinking to myself, "What would I do in this situation?" But I partially think that I removed myself from having to make that decision because the decision was just so hard and everyone was making good arguments and I understood every point of view, that I never felt myself particularly saying, "I would do this." I was more so just like, what are they going to do? And I'm glad that I don't have to make this choice myself.
I would have voted for Walter,
Yeah,
hands down, because I think that the whole idea of someone throwing money out at throwing money at it, totally illegal, and I wouldn't want to be a part of that.
that's true. Even though they were finding ways to make it so that it wasn't strictly illegal, like I forget, they actually bring it up in the discussion about why they shouldn't be able to do this, and it's like, well, actually, the reason it works is because of this, that, and the other. And he said the language says, regardless of your decision and stuff like that. It's like, oh no, oh no.
Right. Well, all the more reason to vote for Walter.
Yeah, and I think I would like to believe that I would have voted for Walter too, but I definitely understood, um, and have understood. We've watched a lot of shows on this show, a lot of movies, and one of the things that constantly comes up is the question of saving saving the many by sacrificing the few, and that was absolutely this question. Um,
It's that
and
whole trolley conundrum.
yeah,
Like
no,
if you could switch the
exactly.
tracks, but if and hit and save three people versus one person.
Right, 100%. And so I found myself like understanding more and more the the argument behind saving the more people. But like you were saying earlier, if they had given the heart to Walter, the movie would have been different because the movie could have been the hospital closed down and now it's not as prevalent, but more people theoretically would have died because there's one less hospital for people to go to. Um,
That's true.
so
But that moral dilemma falls on the person who is doing the funding. And I think like the important thing that you'd have to do is remove that from your mind because like yes, you would be saving more people, but that's not your fault. You didn't make the choice to not fund the hospital. That's
right,
not on you. Like you did the right thing and then that's your part. And then everyone else should be doing the right thing as well. That's my take on
I mean that's 100% accurate. The person could still just give the money to the hospital because it's a nice thing to do.
Yeah.
Um,
And I'll tell
people,
you more about like how I'm processing that that information when we wrap up this episode, our after talk, I guess you could say.
mm-hmm.
But I did want to add one more thing. I just wanted to ask you how you felt about the fact that they decided to make the future in 2021 and there was no COVID. Why pick 2021? Like they could have picked any year.
Yeah,
Why didn't they pick like 2012 and 2019 or something like that?
I really don't know, but in my opinion, it didn't even matter because the way they filmed the two different timelines or time frames were completely opposite of each other. 2014 notice was like brightly colored and like
It was
there's
warm.
actually lights and it's warm. They go to 2021, it's blue, it's depressing, everyone is upset, and I was just like, "Yep, that's 2021."
I almost feel like they didn't need the title cards to tell us when the year is, like that this is the past and this is the future because of the way that they treated the way it looks. Like not the way that the characters look necessarily,
Mm-hmm.
but just the coloring of the film and the choices they made in that production design. You could definitely tell like when you are without looking at the dates.
I agree. And they did lose the time cards as they continued the movie, but it was one of those things where they did the time cards like what? Like I think I wanted to say they did the time cards 3 or 4 times, and then like at the like second half of the movie, they just lost the time the date cards like entirely. So it felt like the movie was trying to is trying to think about the audience that might not get it as quick because like this is like one of the third things we've talked about since The Witcher that has done this kind of you know jumping between these times, but then showing you with time cards when we know The Witcher season one didn't do it at all, and this one tries to I guess walk the line in the middle where they show it to you at the beginning and they keep showing it to you every time we flip until we get to like the second half of the movie and then they don't show it at all because at this point they're like we established the motif, you guys get what's happening, we shouldn't have to keep showing them, and so that's what they do, which is fine. And did the Eternals do the same kind of thing where they did it a lot in the beginning then stopped doing it, or they just did it the whole way through?
They did it the whole way through, but they missed one.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Oh man. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, as far as the movie goes, I'm like you. I didn't like. I was surprised by the movie because I didn't know what to expect, and I liked the movie, but I have no desire to watch it again. And I wouldn't necessarily say people have to go and watch it. I think that it's a fine movie. It works. There are some really good conversations. It's challenging, which is probably the theme of the stuff that we've watched this past weekend is just challenging. And for that, I think that it's interesting. But yeah, I probably wouldn't watch it again.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely would not go around telling people that they should watch this or that they need to see this. But if someone asked me like, "Oh, should I watch it?" I'd be like, "Oh yeah, definitely watch it." Um, but I would definitely. I don't know. It's just it makes you think about stuff, I guess.
It absolutely do. It absolutely does. But what did you guys think about the movie? Have you seen it? Did you feel like you were challenged and when you were watching it and seeing the different opinions? Do you feel like you would have made a choice similar to the different characters and different arguments? Did you find yourself being pulled one way more than the other? Whatever you thought, comment below. Let us know. And while you're down there, if you give us a like, share, subscribe. Even if you don't, though, I have been Chris, and this has been
Cheryl, and we'll see you all next time.